Hello everybody, my name is Cheryl Grindell and I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Sheffield, and I'm also a physiotherapist at Sheffield Teaching Hospital. I'm going to talk to you today about a project I was involved in whilst I was working for the National Institute for Health and Research, Clark, Yorkshire and Humber, and this is a qualitative study that explored the use of creative co-design to mobilise knowledge in health. So first of all, just a brief explanation of knowledge mobilisation. So this is a term that is being used more frequently now in the healthcare literature. Some of you may be more familiar with the term knowledge translation, and quite often you'll see the two are used interchangeably. I'm not going to go into the details of the differences between the different terms used in the knowledge mobilisation field, as this is a whole presentation in itself. But as you will all be aware, getting research used in practice has long been a problem. We now know that what was once assumed to be a rational, straightforward, linear process is actually a really messy and relational one. So knowledge mobilisation is a term that is used to cover a wealth of activities that all share the same purpose of getting knowledge or evidence actively used in practice. It can be described as a collective, interactive and multi-directional process that is context-specific. Co-production has become a popular way to mobilise knowledge in healthcare, and in the healthcare literature, co-production has been described in many ways, encompassing many different activities ranging from more consultative involvement type activities to your more genuine egalitarian co-production. In fact, Williams et al. Have recently published a paper and they've coined the term co-ubiquity for this plethora of co-production terms and activities. So first of all, a little bit about how this project came about. So the Translating Knowledge into Action theme of the Clark, Yorkshire and Humber are a team of both clinical and design researchers who have been working together with service users and service providers, so that is patients, carers, clinicians, managers, to come up with more practical ways to get evidence used in practice. And they have been developing and using their particular blend of co-production, which they have called creative co-design. So this project was a qualitative study wanting to analyse the actual creative co-design approach. So we interviewed 20 participants from across 14 of the Translating Knowledge into Action projects. So these were either the project leads or people who had an assistive role with the project lead. So they were clinicians, clinical academics or academics, and we interviewed them as we were wanting to understand what they thought about the methods and whether they felt the methods helped mobilise knowledge. We used the framework approach to analyse the data. Data analysis was an iterative process, and it did involve halfway through a workshop with 6 out of the first 10 interview participants. They carried out a series of activities which helped us to understand the data so far and helped us to shape and steer the analysis from there on. So from the analysis, 3 main themes emerged from the data, which I am now going to talk to you about. So the first theme is creative and visual. So from the data, it was suggested that the creative co-design activities were novel and informal, and they encouraged engagement from the outset. So we know that sometimes doing things that are a little bit different, a little bit, unusual to what we're used to, people can be a little bit reticent. But this initial reticence was overcome by the use of a series of tasks that helped participants develop their skills and confidence in the activities through an interactive and progressive process. So the visual nature of the tools and techniques used helped to stimulate thought and discussion and enabled participants to think in different ways. So a couple of quotes to demonstrate this. People were so engaged in what they were doing and what they were talking about. It's one of those things where you go to a session and you think, oh, I'm going to have to do some silly games. Then the next minute, you're really enjoying it all and you're all a team and it's done exactly what it was meant to do. You'd still be in word world, if that makes sense, whereas it's sort of flagged like, get people to do it in a picture. They're thinking about it differently because they've got to draw it, but they're not in word world, if that makes sense. You're getting them to think slightly more creatively. The second theme is design-led. So the input of the designer was considered invaluable by the interview participants. The impact of their contribution appeared to be threefold. This included their expertise in developing the creative activities themselves for the workshops, their design perspective and designerly way of working and thinking that helped to get the best out of participants, and their ability to visualise the knowledge gathered and turn it into visible prototypes. So turning that knowledge into something visible and tangible helped participants to feel that they'd been listened to and that their ideas had been valued, and also gave them a sense of pride and ownership over the co-designed outputs. So a few quotes to demonstrate this. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. I think they brought so much to the table. Their experience and skill with how they put their workshops together was absolutely fantastic. So they brought all the different tools. I think without a designer, it would have been very, very difficult. I thought the using that design process was really good, of that creating prototypes, that you had something physical that you could pass around and move and discuss. You know, the things that they make, it shows that they've been listened to and that their ideas are there for them to see. The third theme was creates the conditions. So the creative and visual and design-led approach supported the creation of an informal, open and honest environment. It helped create a safe space for workshop participants to work in together. The data suggests it helped to flatten the usual hierarchies that can exist between healthcare professionals and patients, and it fostered an inclusive environment, making everybody feel like they were all just in the same boat together. This helped make everybody's voice be heard. So compared to perhaps some more traditional ways of data collection, where people aren't always confident to speak out or aren't always able to articulate what they want to say in words, and it allowed all perspectives to be heard and shared, so participants were able to consider and gain an understanding of both sides of the story, not just their own. The safe environment and the creative activities allowed some critical distance to be put between people's personal experience and their opinions. So by having that drawing or physical artefact to discuss, it allowed sort of any conflict to be managed in a better way. You know, people would be discussing and maybe disagreeing about the object rather than one individual's personal opinion. So again, some quotes to demonstrate this. So I think really at the heart of the method is equality. Everybody that participates, and I think it's an extremely rich method in terms of participation, in equal participation, and the opportunity for service users, carers and staff to come together and explore and discuss and create innovative ways to move services forward. It's a naff thing to say in a way, but a picture can say 1,000 words. Rather that, if you're able to draw something and represent something simply and visually, it can take a lot of the cognitive and language bit out, which I have to say is perfect for stroke survivors who may have speech issues and cognitive impairment. And it also kind of flattens out that idea of who would know best. So it kind of reduces some of the power hierarchy that you might often get between patients and staff. So finally, the results from the data do suggest that the interview participants did perceive the creative co-design approach to be successful in enabling knowledge mobilisation in the context of the projects involved in this qualitative study. This was achieved by the interconnected and synergistic relationship between the three themes: creative and visual, design-led, and creating the conditions. Hopefully from the data and from this lovely illustration here, you can see how each theme is reliant on elements of each other in order to improve the knowledge mobilisation process. Hopefully you can see that if you take one of the three themes away, that those conditions to ensure that genuine egalitarian co-production happens and successful knowledge mobilisation is achieved wouldn't occur. So obviously there was a lot to cover today in 12 minutes, and if you are interested in reading in more detail about the project, I am in the process of drafting a paper for publication, so please do watch this space. Finally, I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I'd like to thank my Clark TK2A theme colleagues and co-authors, and also Chris Redford from Lab for Living at Sheffield Hallam University for his lovely illustrations of these slides. If you would like more information about the projects themselves that were involved in this study, then please do have a look at our casebook, the link you can find here on this slide. I really hope that you have enjoyed the presentation today, and I look forward to any questions that you might have.